Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Transformation Talk. I'm here today with Pema Teeter, who is a writer and story coach. You can find her at storycharmer.com and pemateeter.com. And I am thrilled to be talking with you today. Thanks, Pema.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing me onto this lovely forum for conversation.
Yeah, it is... It started from that place of grief, and it really grew into this conversation about transformation, and I know that both of those topics are really close to your heart, so I'm excited to get your take on it. And I would love to start with 9/11, with your Memory to Light series and your experience in 9/11, and I'm just going to say before we start that if you don't know Pema and you don't know her writing, and please go and read this series. It is unbelievable about your experience with 9/11. And you can just click on the 9/11 tag on the story cloud on pemateeter.com and find everything. So in a nutshell, because I know it's a huge topic, can you talk a bit about your personal experience with 9/11 and then what happened when you wrote the Memory to Light series?
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like I'm going to the way back. So, in 2001, in August 22nd, I moved to New York City to follow my dream and go to playwriting school. It was unbelievable to me what I was doing. I'm from California. I lived there my whole life, and there I was going to New York, which, on door open wide to a dream. And 3 weeks later was 9/11. And I was standing on a street corner, maybe about a mile away, watching the first plane had already gone into the building, and there were people all on the corners looking up and speculating what was happening. And then I went off to class. It was the first day of class. And because I wanted to unprocess, but I had to go to class, I absorbed. I did this thing that I do with a photographic memory and just kind of took a picture and with my mind so that I could process it later. And there's my kitty. Yeah. And I took that to class, and the experience is that, like, I absorbed so much of it in that moment so that I could process it later. I think it just really, really sank in. And so to shorten this story that I'm telling you now, over the years, I was trying to tell that story over and over again, but failing. And finally, it opened up, and I could tell it on my blog. I could tell it one day at a time. I took a month off and was able to explore. And what I found out in exploring was that the trauma, there were so many of us affected by that day. And the trauma that I was experiencing, I discovered was that day was just a trigger that made all of the traumas prior to that day in my life stand up and make me take notice. And I was suddenly having to deal with things in ways deal with things from my life that I hadn't known I needed to deal with, either all over again or at all. Mm-hmm. And so my experience of 9/11 was in stereo of all my other traumas. And I thought, if this is the way it happened for me, I'm sure that we need a communal experience of sharing our grief. And so that's how the Memory to Light project started.
Mm-hmm. And that was...
came from.
Yeah, that was the month leading up to the 10th anniversary that you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so deeply moving reading that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I have long had a theory that one of the reasons that we have such huge outpourings of grief when a public figure dies or when 9/11 happens is that we do have all these traumas inside of us that we haven't fully grieved, and then all of a sudden it's permission to cry, it's permission to just let it out, and it comes up whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, even going to someone's funeral, someone who is maybe not one of our family, um, maybe we're supporting a friend, somebody who's a friend from long ago who has passed, even going to a service like that brings us closer to our own lives and understanding. It opens a little door to this grief that we didn't really know that we carry.
Mm-hmm. I love that your kitty just opened your door behind you as you said that.
Everything's in sync.
Yeah. So I was looking at your series again a little bit in preparation for talking with you today and getting just goosebumps all over again. But I love one of the things that you wrote about at the very end, and it might have even been in the postscript, I can't remember, was that you had a conversation with a friend. You were kind of reeling your best friend's baby shower was going to be on September 11th on the 10th anniversary, and then another funeral, and all this stuff was happening. And you called a friend who basically said to you, you have prioritized loss over life. And the emotional impact of sort of that realization. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm pretty sure that you're not the only person who's ever done that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So, let me see how I can get into that particular thought. So, my dear friend Lisa, who I then traveled with, we'll talk about that story soon. I've known her for a very long time, and I called her up. So, a friend and mentor of mine died suddenly, and he died right before this trip I was about to make, and I had been planning for a very long time to go to New York for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And my best friend was pregnant with twins, and it turns out that my best friend knows who I am, where I come from, what I write about, what I stake my life on, and my passions. And so I found out that some other friends of hers were throwing her baby shower on September 11th. And I was like, what? And this happened right at the same time that I got the news that this dear friend and mentor had died suddenly. And so I decided in a frenzy, oh my God, I've got to go to his funeral, and they're having it in just a few days, and I'm going to be down there in Santa Barbara anyway in a couple of weeks. I'll just go early because I had to drive. So I called up my friend and I told her this, and we just had this horrible falling out. Take us back to Lisa, calling Lisa. I was asking her for help. Like, can you walk me through this? I really can't think for myself right now, and I just sublet my apartment. I don't have a home as of tomorrow, and yet all of this stuff has unraveled. And that's when she said to me, Pema, your life is going swimmingly right now. You're in a wonderful relationship. Your best friend is about to have twins. Your own work is going beautifully. You're happy, and you're dropping all of that, all of those plans, these summer plans that you have with people that you love. You're dropping all of that to go to a funeral in another city. And I'm like, but it's a funeral. You can't miss those. And she basically brought up to me that over the many years that we'd been close, she had watched me make choices for death over choices for the life, the things in our lives that make life the reason we want to live them. Celebrations, baby showers, birthdays, anniversaries. I was always going off somewhere to either make something happen or kind of cradle an experience that was passing out of existence. And it just shattered me open in that moment. I couldn't even breathe. I didn't really understand. I couldn't comprehend anything except this thud in my chest. And so I went to work trying to figure out how I could undo everything I had or maybe put back together everything I had just broken apart, and began to wonder how I could still honor and do something for 9/11 with as much profundity as I had already planned. Like, I didn't know what else to do besides go and I'd been trying to write a book for 6 years, and like this felt like my life path. And then with this kind of bomb dropped in the middle of it, so to speak, it made me face up to what was really there for me. I guess it was like the first hint of transformation. I didn't notice it yet, but it was the first hint of it. Like, I'm on this journey because I think I need to tell this story. And then suddenly this journey is throwing me in a whole new direction, which is, you keep choosing life, death over life. Is that what you want to keep doing? And that's what happened in that conversation.
Wow. So you started putting the pieces back together, and where did that take you? Where did that next step take you?
So, as I said, I was planning on going down to Santa Barbara, and I was planning on a writer's retreat. I had gone on a big journey the year before. I got a job on a concert tour, and I was all excited about this big journey. And then after that journey, I was thinking about writing, and I just thought, oh, if only I had time. And then I realized I took a job and took 6 weeks to go do that. What if I designated myself this journey? It didn't take somebody else's journey, but took my own journey. What if I took a month, went to a place that feels wonderful, and wrote and took that journey? I didn't know, there wasn't the 9/11 Project yet. There was just 30 days of writing to do. And so this was right at the same time of the story I just told you about Lisa kind of rattling my cage and waking me up. And so the next step was I indeed went, I found a little hotel to stay in for 2 weeks because I had already sublet my apartment. I stayed in Portland. I did as much as I could with the plans that I had broken. I tried to put them back together as much as possible. And then I went down for those 30 days in Santa Barbara. And then while I was there, I thought, okay, well, the writing has begun. It's day number 1. It's day number 2. What am I doing? What am I writing? And then that's when the Memory to Light project occurred to me. I just thought, all right, well, I've been failing every time I try to write these book chapters. I'll write a few chapters and then something breaks, or I don't know where it goes. So I'm just going to write it day by day and follow the tail of it and see where it leads me, because I know that it's here, but I just don't know where it goes.
And what was your experience of writing that day to day and putting it up on your blog and having people so drawn to it? What was that like for you?
It was incredibly freeing. One of the things I do with my work, Story Charmer, is that I have story charming parties. And it's several folks who get together for an evening, and we tell stories in a particular way. And one of the things I tell people on that night is that being heard is being held. And when we share our stories, we're being held. And when we're held, so much opens up, like so much space opens up that things get created we didn't expect. And transformation happens just from being heard. And that 30 days felt like I had a space. I had a physical space. I had a blog space. I had invited people into the room, so to speak. I was being held, and every day was a new. I didn't know what I was going to write the next day. Every day was a new kind of inspiration and a very intuitive journey. I just would feel something and think, is this what there is to write about? And I would let it trigger whatever story there was to be told around that thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Been on those days.
Well, and then getting the response that you did from your readers, did that change you in any way? Did that sort of change the experience for you with people really? Because I know it was healing for a lot of people to read what you wrote.
It was. It gives me the chills thinking about it. It was incredibly healing. I feel like, if I had created that space and I was in it by myself, then I would be hearing my own voice bounce off the walls. But I was in that room and I was in that space with all of these other ears and voices, and I knew that I didn't have these experiences of grief alone. I knew that I'm not the only person who's lost people, and I knew that that experience I had of 9/11 that brought back all of my traumas, and I just remember thinking the reason I wanted to write a book about it is because I wanted to kind of I wanted to instigate people's healing around this thing that we were told to go shopping after. You know, like
Right.
shopping is not going to heal anything, you know?
Right.
And there's so much to heal in our lives personally, and this huge national, international traumatic event affected people personally, and so I wanted to instigate that kind of healing. So so I finally gave up on the book and thought, well, I'll do it for myself, but I'll make it a story circle. I'm not alone in this. I want other people to share their stories. Other people logging on and reading and sharing their stories and experiences made me, one, feel heard, and so be able to keep talking, and two, hear their stories, so it was easier to, it's like walking arm in arm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like spraining your ankle and somebody's helping to carry you. You know, like we just were helping, we were carrying each other. And in this kind of, you know, when you're moving through space, not on your own strength, but on also the strength of others, you get lifted by other forces too, I think. You know, all of our life forces are just kind of weaved together, and we're lifted by an even third force, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just lifted. And that's what the experience felt like. I wasn't just I was telling my stories because they needed to come out, but I was like channeling the stories of everyone else too.
Mm-hmm.
And also the space that other people had to share were lifting mine. I could keep going on and on, but I keep saying the same thing over in different ways.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and I love that it's there for people to go back to, and yeah, it's just a beautiful piece. So again, if you're watching and you haven't read it, please, or even if you have, go back and read it. It's amazing. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about last fall. You went on a major adventure, which I would love for you to tell us a little bit about, and about the transformation in that for you.
Oh, gosh, the transformation in that. Okay, so I went on this, a friend of mine, Lisa, we've talked about Lisa, we all know Lisa now. So Lisa was Dean of Students on Semester at Sea. This voyage of Semester at Sea, it's a college-bound, it's an ocean-faring college campus. This particular semester, they were traveling around the Atlantic. And Lisa's been telling me about it for years. Pema, you gotta get on the ship somehow. You gotta get a job on the ship when we're taking a voyage. Well, Lisa's going on a voyage, and I thought, I gotta go. So, short story, I joined her for the last third of the trip. I met them in Buenos Aires, and we traveled to several places in South America, and 5 to be exact. We went into the Amazon, we went to Rio, we went to a little island called Dominica, which was the most glorious nature I think I've ever stumbled into. And it was this community cutting through the ocean and living together while we were traveling. That was the trip. And so in terms of transformation, I thought that I was going to have 5 weeks, 6 actually, if you add in Buenos Aires, to just go and write. I was going to be on a ship. I didn't have a job to do there necessarily. I thought I was going to have like a 6-week traveling writer's retreat. And then I found out that seasickness has quite an effect on your daily living.
Oh my.
And also, the Wi-Fi was negligible. And the way that I write, especially when I'm writing on my blog, like for the Memory to Light project, it's very interactive. I write something and then I post before I hit publish. I'm formatting it and I'm imagining reading it as the audience, and then I'll write some more. So Wi-Fi is really important. And that was gone. So, and then there was the traveling schedule where we would get off the ship and travel for a few days and then get back on the ship. And all of that just made it just about impossible to get any work done. So I was only sitting in my own stuff for 6 weeks, and then taking it around the countries that we were in. While everyone else was at class or working, I was looking out the window at an endless ocean, or I was contemplating the things that I had taken with me into this very enclosed space. And I thought that working, like actually interacting with writing, with people, was going to help change me. But then when I realized that none of my kind of modalities were there to do, I thought, well, this trip is this will be 6 weeks to write off on the calendar for getting anything done. And it turned out that I just kind of curled so far inward and took so much rest time that things changed, and things changed that I wasn't prepared for. And I pause now because I always wonder, then there was the end of the journey. And since I've come home, it's been almost a year, and since I've come home, every time someone asks me to talk about the voyage, I think, where do I start? Do I start with the end, or do I start with the beginning? I just realized I started Memory to Light from the end. So the end of the voyage, a student died.
Oh.
Did you know that part?
I didn't. No.
So it's one of the reasons I wondered, I thought, is this why we're talking about this now too? It was an accident that didn't have anything to do with the ship, but it was traumatic and shocking. It was shocking what happened. And having had experienced so many different moments of loss in my life, I thought, there's so many things that are happening when you're in the middle of loss. You've got the thinking brain, you've got the completely shattered kind of being part of you, and then there's the survival part, then there's the community part. Is everybody else okay? Mm-hmm. And all of those things are firing in very nonlinear ways. And my friend was one of the people holding herself personally responsible for getting everybody home safe. Mm-hmm. And we were roommates. We were sleeping this far away from each other in our little berths, And she's one of my dearest friends. Curiously, she's the friend that told, she's the one that broke it open for me, what I was choosing when I was not choosing life.
Yeah.
And here I was. It felt like my main job. All of the things that got me on that journey, it felt like my main job at the time was just to be a support for her as much as I possibly could. And because I didn't have a job on the ship, and because I wasn't a student, and because I became a part of that community, but I was a latecomer to it, I felt a little bit, I didn't feel like an outsider, but I noted their community was incredibly tight, and they welcomed me into it. And so I felt like, how can I be in this community with all of these people experiencing this tremendous loss? How can I be part of it? But what am I doing here? Why am I here? And so two things occur to me. One is that I just tried to be as much of a support to Lisa and anybody else I came across as possible. But the other thing that occurs to me when I wonder why am I here was it's all students. It was mostly students, faculty, young people, and I spent about 4 days crying nonstop and grappling with, okay, but I'm a little bit on the outside of this community. Why am I crying so much? And I finally just gave over to, I feel like if the more I can cry, the more I can kind of, channel the grief. I was a young person when I lost my brother. I was 16 and he was 17. And here were, 400 young people who had just lost somebody dear to them. And I spent the last 20 years imagining being my brother's best friend, my brother's like best friend growing up, my different family members. I imagined for the last 20 years being those people experiencing my brother's death. And here was another group of young people who had just gone through that, who are going through that. And so I just thought, if I can carry some of the grief, then that's what I'll do, because I can't think of anything else to do while I'm here, while this community is grieving, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was another instigator of the transformation, because when I came home, I couldn't write, I couldn't sleep enough. Months went by before I didn't feel listless anymore. So when we talk about that voyage and transformation, it even feels like I thought I was going to go get stuff done and I couldn't do anything. And then that terrible tragedy happened, and that took all of my energy and my whole community's energy. And so to come home and like process it with people, that wasn't going to happen either.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess all of that to say that particular story of transformation happened from a lot of quiet, a lot of silence. Just like there was first the motion of moving inside and thinking, and then there was the experience of jettisoning everything because of the trauma, and then just being in that. And here we are a year later, and I finally got back into work and writing in April. It took that long, last April.
Wow. But how amazing that you were able to give yourself that quiet, because so many people don't.
I was really in a very sweet position. You know, I had moved to be with my boyfriend, who's now my fiance, and I had been working my whole life up to that point, and here I was in a position to just be able to rest. I didn't have to work my hair out, you know, work my brains out. I could actually be held once again, and the healing happens in being held, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much in that sense of processing communal grief for people too, and that's a whole other conversation. I think it's fascinating that you felt like an instrument in that way. Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating. Our conversation is knitting these experiences together in a way that shows me a theme. You know, my experience of the grief of 9/11, it was personal, but I wanted to grieve collectively because it felt so necessary. You know, I was in school during 9/11, and we came to class and wondered, what the hell are we doing getting art degrees? Why? What's the use, you know? And then at least there in that scenario, we could grieve collectively. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that other than I'm noticing that. Like, oh yeah, look at that. There's a theme.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Collectively grieving, letting ourselves grieve with each other.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about the transformation of the split. You just recently took your personal writings off your business site. So storycharmer.com is where you do your work. Mm-hmm. And then PemaTeeter.com became this sort of playground for your writing and your creativity. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about sort of what that happened, how that happened, and how you're feeling in it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I feel very excited by it. Like I feel like the lid just got taken off, and I can say whatever I want. I can talk about anything. I can explore ideas and put random kind of workings of my mind there. But also it gives me free rein to talk about grief and transformation. Those things are those types of things. I was having trouble understanding who I was in my service. Like, you know, I was all the way up until about a year and a half ago, I was copywriting. And so, but I was writing stories, and my blog was Story Charmer, where I kind of also sold my copywriting services. But the stories that I told were things like Memory to Light, and they were, you know, the very deep and focused thoughts that I have that, well, does that have anything to do with your site and what you want to say on your site and how I can process that? So, two things happened. One, I stopped copywriting and really let myself understand and explore where to go next. And two, when I found what was next, I realized that's it. I just really want to focus on what I'm offering, which is now story coaching, book coaching, helping people to write their own words. And I want to take all of my other stories and thinking out loud that might be distracting or just in their own world and put them on another spot, another place, so they can be whatever they want, and I can focus my work on my work, and I can focus conversations about the work there. Curiously, the last post I wrote for Story Charmer had everything to do with grief.
I noticed that.
So, I sometimes wonder who I'm kidding. I sometimes wonder when and how it's going to come back together again. But right now, the separation feels really good and really important, and it just feels like a playground.
That's neat. When I saw that on your site, when I read the Teeter.com, I felt this lightning. I was like, oh, it's permission. It's just feels like this beautiful permission to just play and be creative and let the muses come and go and whatever it is.
Yeah. And I had been kind of strangled by my need to get it right on my site because this is work after all, And, follow your bliss, right? Isn't that what we see all the time in the bumper sticker that is our lives?
Yes.
I have been thinking in lots of different areas I've just discovered right now. I've been thinking a lot about, yes, follow your bliss. Sure, follow your bliss. But sometimes it's not a straight route. It's not like a freeway travel to your bliss. It's like, first you go here, and then you go here, and then you go here, and then holy cow, how'd you end up over here? But your bliss is right over there if you could just make the points head in that direction, So right now, the separation of those two things feels like 2 points along the way.
Nice. Can you tell us quickly what you are offering through storycharmer.com?
Yeah. So on Storycharmer, I have a program called Talk Your Draft, Write Your Book, and it's a series of conversations of organized conversations that kind of articulate what you want your book to be, what your message is, who your audience is, and then kind of jostles out your stories and organizes them into a content strategy, a table of contents, a chapter outline. And then from there, if you want to keep working together, then we can actually talk out your chapters. And then from there, if you need further help, I can actually mentor your writing if you want to. If you still want support in the writing, the support is still there. That's the main offer. And what I'm finding as I offer that, and as I talk about it, people will say, "Can you help me? Can you help me talk out my presentation, or can you help me talk out my speaker's platform?" Or I've been thinking about these stories and these issues, and I don't really know how to align them or pull them apart. And so really that's what we do. I guess if there were such a thing, I'd call myself a block coach. I just help people untangle things. It's curious now that I say that, because with Story Charmer, I was just talking about having done that. I had to untangle what's happening over here and what's happening over here. So I'm like conditioner. I help untangle. Experience to be silky smooth.
I love it. Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah, that's what I do.
That sounds great. It sounds really, really, really helpful.
Thank you. It's really helpful, and it's really fun, and it feels so good to, feels good to help people, definitely, but it's wonderful to hear people say, "Oh my gosh, I get it, thank you. This is I can finish this now. I can complete this now."
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I like to think and talk a lot about us having the answers inside of us, if we can go within. And I'm also a firm believer that we need those mirrors held up too. Like,
Yeah.
can you hold up the mirror so I can actually see what's inside of me? Because right
Yeah.
now it's just tangled.
Right. And that's exactly what you do in the transformation talks. I mean, I was reading your introduction to them, and that's what we do with grief and transformation. When we're completely lost in our trauma, and then we begin to kind of peek out in little ways and see and hear that other people are feeling that way too.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid, but that's the way it works.
Yep.
Then we know we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There's that mirror. We can start to see, we can try it on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I
absolutely am with you, believing that we have the knowledge inside of ourselves. And sometimes all it takes is talking it out. My favorite question is to ask, I'll ask someone a question and they'll say, I don't know. And I'll say, well, if you knew, what would it be?
Yes.
And then they'll tell me.
Yes.
We know. We always know, even if it feels like we don't. And just talking it out and knowing that we're being heard and that people will ask us questions. Like you're doing right now. In this conversation, I've kind of made a lot of connections that I hadn't made before. Mm. Which leads me to another favorite thing about the work that I do that has taught me, which is conversation creates. Mm-hmm. Like, we're creating so much in this conversation for ourselves, and who knows what these kinds of conversations create for other people who come across them. Mm-hmm. The whole mirror effect, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was hoping for, is that sense of people not feeling alone and recognizing themselves in other people's stories.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you my last 3 questions here. Okay. The first one is, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the world, what would it be?
I think it would be that everyone could recognize that to heal yourself is to heal the world. If when you can heal yourself, you heal your world that you live inside of, and then you can't help but affect other people and make that chain reaction. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. What brings you the most joy?
I think being on a hillside in Central California with like fall sunshine hitting those, dry grasses. There's just something that makes me feel completely open and exposed with these like scrubby hillsides and nature in California. I just feel like I used to be a snake in another life or something.
Oh, which ties into Story Charmer.
Oh.
Because that it's funny because when I think of Story Charmer, I think of like Snake Charmer, and I think of these words coming out of a basket.
Well, maybe I was.
I love it. What's one fun or interesting thing about you that makes you uniquely you?
Well, a little party game that I play sometimes is that my brain holds forever. Once I've learned someone's astrological sign, I never forget it.
Wow.
So I met you 20 years ago, and I see you again. I'll be like, oh, right. I won't remember your name, but once I figure out who you are, I'll remember your sign.
How funny.
Isn't that strange? Sometimes I'll sit at a party and I'll be like, Libra, Scorpio, Leo, Aries. It's the weirdest thing for my brain to hold on to, of all things to remember.
That is hysterical. That is a unique skill.
Yeah.
There's also, I just want to mention too, because I think it's fun, there's also a fun little video clip on your blog about you meeting Johnny Depp.
Oh yeah, so that was fun.
That's kind of a fun thing too, if anybody wants to go check that out.
Yes, I showed my friend that after it happened. She's like, oh my God, you were flirting with Johnny Depp. I was like, was I? was just being intellectual.
Hilarious. That's great. Oh, well, thank you so much, Pema. It's such a beautiful conversation, and I just appreciate you sharing your stories with the world and with us today.
You are so welcome, and I'm just overflowing with gratitude for our conversation. It's it puts me in touch with a lot of beautiful things and cool understandings, and I'm just very appreciative. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. So again, Pema Teeter, PemaTeeter.com, StoryCharmer.com. Have a beautiful day, and thank you again.
Thank you. You too.